Welcome, everybody, to the Fun Astrology Weekly Update on video. I'm Thomas Miller. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to talk about some things in this video that we don't talk about in Monday's podcast, and it is wow. I've just stumbled across some amazing stuff that I want to show you and share with you, and I'm starting this just thinking about how amazing astrology is. Let me just show you some headlines that I ran across. I don't know why. I normally don't do this, but I just dropped in on some headlines before I started putting this together to record. And check this out and see how this doesn't play with the astrology. Actually, before we do that, let me show you the chart for this week. I mean, this is the big event. On Thursday, right here, the sun enters Aries. And keep in mind, we have Venus and Mercury in retrograde, and Neptune on the 30th will move from its point at, what is this, 2937 now, will move into 0 degrees Aries as well. So this is this is just amazing what all is going on right now. And by the way, let's not forget this. Saturn is in orb of this whole transition into Aries, although it doesn't catch up and get there until May. Now, let me just show you a couple of things. I just stumbled onto this. This is a website, the Drudge Report. It has a bent. It used to be conservative, I would say, and now well, let's just say that Drudge, I don't think, likes, or whoever's writing it now, doesn't like the current administration. So just keep that in context. Trump bombs Yemen. I mean, that's a flat-out headline. That happened over the weekend. Threatens to attack Iran next. Now, we've talked about this. We've talked about it at length. Whenever you have Saturn and Neptune moving into Aries together, I mean, Saturn-Neptune anyway is that kind of a connection. But when you take that already tense, like stuff happens around this, and you move it into Aries, that's when you get headlines like this. Does that make sense? Threatens to attack Iran next. I mean, what are we looking at here? Are we looking at a world war? Are we looking at least a big major regional war? I mean, and that so fits the astrology. I'm not talking about the politics or anything about this, the decision-making or who is in charge. It doesn't matter. This would have happened already, regardless. A listener, wonderful listener, Nancy down in Florida, pointed that out over the weekend, and I just thought that's a brilliant analogy. Yes, exactly. It doesn't matter. This was there millions of years ago. All right, how about this one? Like I said, I just clicked through. These are all on the same page on a Sunday morning. Democratic Party favorability drops to record low. But this one, voters want leaders to fight. That's the one that should be in red, because what does that represent? Aries energy. Absolutely. If y'all aren't seeing this, it's like, wow, I don't know what else I can do to point out, because this is the conflict that is exactly setting up what we've been talking about. Newsom podcast signals pivot to center ahead of White House run. Now, could we get any more Neptunian leaving Pisces than that? I've been through the fires here watching local news in California with Governor Newsom. He is as left as East is from West. I think the country is trying to find, wouldn't we love that perfect candidate who is young, who is vibrant, who is respectful, and who is in the middle. I mean, can represent both sides and bring this division more closely to center. That person, as far as I know and can look on the landscape, does not exist at this point. But boy, if they ever emerged, and if they could communicate that well. But Newsom is not a conservative. I mean, there's just no way that that's possible. But there's another 29 Neptune of lies and deception. So watch that. Here's another one. Robert Glasscock talked about this 7 years ago. Trump stumbles up the step. Well, look, I could stumble up the steps. You could stumble up the step. Look at the first step there. I mean, that's a big one. But okay, health concerns, there have been that for Donald Trump. Here's another one that was interesting. This is all on the same page. Pam Bondi is the most besieged cabinet member. Now, I've kind of been on this and have been putting some stuff up on Twitter, X, whatever. There were 3 people that made comments before the election was decided. If I'm elected day one, well, this was President Trump, day one, I will get those JFK, RFK, MLK, and Epstein files released out to the public. It's day 50 something, I think. Are they ever going to come? No. So Pam Bondi, when she was appointed, she said, when I get in there day one, Kash Patel, the head of the FBI, when I get in there day one, I'll release the files. They still haven't been released. And that is so this energy that people are not going to tolerate it. You know, I remember when this was a couple of years ago, when Jupiter left Aquarius and moved into Pisces. I was looking forward to that because obviously it was going to amplify spirituality. And it was during a retrograde, so it moved from Aries into Pisces, but only for a few degrees, exactly like what we have happening here with this Aries transition in. And then it came back out, and then it went back in. When it came back out and went back into Aquarius for only a degree or 2 or 3, I forget how many it was, it didn't really, like, the characteristics were more almost in limbo between both areas, between Aquarius and between Pisces. And then when it moved into Pisces, and it was a pretty fast track, it was only like a 6-month path through, where normally it could take a year. So it shared some of that time, and we got a glimpse of what it was going to be like in Pisces when it moved in the first time. Then it kind of went neutral, and then it came back. And maybe that's what's going to happen here, is that we're going to have Neptune and eventually Saturn by May move into Aries, but give us a glimpse, not a full dose. And then when it moves back out, it might just go a little slack, let's say, for a bit. And then when it moves back in. So we could come back and see these headlines of, like, now people are upset with Pam Bondi about not releasing these files. Boy, just wait a year. I mean, that's what I'm saying is we'll watch it build now and then crescendo when it moves in. And also, and we weren't going to go into this here, but 2028 is another, like, really, really big year. All right, here was another one, and this is health related. And we have Pluto in Aquarius, and we have Jupiter in Gemini. World's deadliest infectious disease possibly could get worse. That was an article about tuberculosis. So these are some of the just scanning headlines that I'm like, you cannot parallel this chart more closely. Now, we are in the stretch in between the eclipses. The next eclipse is the solar eclipse on March 29th, and then the next day on March 30th, Neptune then moves into Aries. So that's where we are, is moving the Sun and Neptune in, and all that will happen while Venus and Mercury are still in retrograde. Now, the other thing I'd like to talk about are the Saros cycles, all right, Saros. A lady by the name of Bernadette Brady popularized this kind of in a way that Noel Teal popularized solar arc astrology. It had been there for a long time. She just brought it forward, brought it to our attention, wrote some incredible material on it, and brought it to life. So I wanted to talk through this a little bit around these 2 eclipses, the lunar eclipse that we just had, and then the solar eclipse coming up on the 29th. So here is the chart of the upcoming solar eclipse. Of course, we just had the lunar eclipse. And these both tie into prior eclipses. And that, in essence, is what Saros cycles are all about. It can get pretty complicated because there are all these numbers of them. But basically, you just have to think about going back. I believe the number is 18 years, 11 days. So you go back that amount of time, and you look for the eclipse that was around that period. So these 2 eclipses, the one that was on March 14th or 15th, depending on where you were, and this upcoming one on March 29th, tied to two prior eclipses of 2007 in March. The lunar eclipse we just had, if you want to take note of this and look it up more, is part of Saros cycle 133. And the one that we are going to have is part of Saros cycle 149, this one right here. So what does that mean to us? Well, let's just break this down and think about what we're dealing with here. With eclipses, the lunar eclipse we just had was a full moon, right? And what do we do on a full moon in any other lunar cycle? We release. Now the moon starts to diminish. It gets less and less. So what do we continue to do in these 2 weeks between? We release. And then we have a new moon during which we create new things. Well, let's just expand this out, because these Saros cycles give us a bigger, broader opportunity to do that same process. So what they indicate, and the way that Bernadette Brady applied them, is that if we go back to the previous ones, so in this case, March of 2007, we can come forward with not a replication necessarily of what happened, but patterns of what happened. So that's what we're going to go back and look at, because in 2007, we have a very distinctive parallel, and that was the Great Recession, the biggest economic dip since the Great Depression. Now, right there, I know your little brain said, oh, we're going to have another. Remember, it's not the same event, just like we could go back and say Neptune moving into Aries last happened right before the Civil War. Are we going to have another shooted out civil war in the United States? That's not what we're indicating. However, those themes that were there that led to the conflict are certainly and have been already there today. And we have two very divided sides politically, almost like we just did back then. Will it turn into viable conflict, warlike conflict? I mean, a war of words is still a war, right? So you don't want to go back and lock on to an exact event. But follow me through with this, because in the Saros cycle 133, that lunar eclipse, which was March 3rd, 2007, what got revealed? It was a revealing that there was a big problem in the financial system, specifically related to mortgages, where people's mortgage agreement, the contract they signed, was for adjustable rates. And all of a sudden, their rate adjusted more than they could pay. So they had to default on their homes, and the bankruptcies that ensued. That collapsed the housing market, which collapsed the stock market, and was a series of dominoes. And what came from that was changes around the mortgage industry and the financial industry both, right? A whole series of changes. So what are we looking at now? Well, we're looking at all of these job changes, and the shift is into technology. So what we were looking at before with banking, now we're looking at with jobs. Many people have been let go since January 20th, and they're scrambling. And I watched a video of one over the weekend, and it's heart-wrenching to watch these, to see this unfold, just like it was hard to watch the mortgage industry and people having to default on their homes. That was equally difficult to watch. So here we are. And I think what the parallel is what was discovered then was that there was a fissure, if you will, in the banking system and the stock markets and the financial system. What we're seeing now is this fissure in the job market. And what have we been talking about? I've been talking about this on my podcast for 2 years. Get a second income. Do something where you can generate money outside of your primary source of money. And that's exactly what we're seeing play out. And the people that have adopted or adapted that, they at least have something else going. The people who have not are sitting flat-footed and all of a sudden having to make the same kind of changes. Like without one income, a two-income family is in trouble. This is very real stuff. And I think this is tied to this time in between these eclipses. And as we look at where we're headed with this, and let's not forget the other ombre here that we absolutely have to consider is Pluto up in Aquarius, because there is the technology piece of all of this. So we're going to have the conflict here, and that's going to be everything from the political upsets, the division of both sides. See, I would really encourage, I mean, I don't know where you are with this. I'll tell you where I am. I got some years ago where I didn't see that either side was representing me. I didn't see that I even had a voice. I understand here in the last couple of weeks, the Speaker of the House told the Republicans, don't go have town hall meetings because it's too disruptive right now. So what do the Democrats do? Well, they go have their town meetings and, that to me is not the solution. But it shows that there's not a representation to this. In other words, because we don't like what they're doing, don't meet. That's my point. That's exactly my point of why I just decided best description I have is one bird, two wings. So there's not a party that represents me. Like I can't go down there and express my opinion. He'll go, oh, Mr. Miller will get right on that for you. I mean, it's laughable, right? Who has the influence? Exactly. Mostly the corporations and the billionaires, as we've seen. So here we are. This is exactly it. And could this all be part of the United States? Remember in 2022, when Pluto went over about this position right in here at 22 degrees Capricorn, we had the United States Pluto return. And could all of this be part of that? Yes, it absolutely could. So these are all some of these changes that I think are staging right now, just exactly as the astrology talks about. Ray Merriman did a beautiful job putting it all together in the Forecast 2025 book. If you're interested in that, as you know, I narrated that to audio, and the link is still there. You can still get it. It's still just as relevant. We're just barely a tick into the whole thing anyway. And it's right there at hightimelinebooks.com. You can pick it up. It's about 5 hours, I think, to listen. I talk slowly, so put it on 1.5, and you can rip through it in pretty short order. But it gives you the whole lay of the land of what this Ray calls the Aries vortex, this zero Aries point, the Aries vortex, because of the other sign changes. Pretty soon, Jupiter will go into Cancer, Uranus will go into Gemini, and Pluto is already there. And over the next year, Saturn and Neptune will dance their way, the retrograde shuffle, into Aries. And that's what he talks about. That's the Aries vortex. And all 5, if you count them, we've got 2 here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 outer planets have not changed signs in such a short period of time. So we don't have a model of that, but we do have a model of what happened with Pluto. And remember, my big thing is, and let's go back to our point here. I'm going to clean this up for us. Voila. Our point here was, I said a minute ago the U.S. was 27. 22 degrees was the Saturn-Pluto conjunction of January 12th, 2020. Right there, my bad. Sorry about that. Corrected right there. And that point, that conjunction, triggered a whole shift, an epic shift. In the 1300s, it was the shift, in essence, from the Dark Ages to the Italian Renaissance. In the 1500s, it was the shift from Catholicism ruling, the domination of Rome politically and religiously, spiritually, to the crown. In the 1770s, Saturn was over in Libra, but Pluto was in Capricorn, and you know what happened then, and now here we are today. So if history of the last 1,000 years guides us, this 250-year cycle is going to create massive shifts. What we don't have is we don't have the all five changing signs at the same time. We don't know how much shaking that's going to do to the system, but we're seeing it right now. And I love Nancy's point. Nancy, if you're catching this, thank you so much for bringing that to my mind, that it doesn't matter who's in charge, because this was written in the sky eons ago that this would unfold in this way. And here we are at this point in human history. So what do we do with this? How do we position ourselves during this 2-week period in between the eclipses? Well, we follow the energetic model that is in front of us, which is the moon is getting smaller. So as you go out at night and you watch the sky get darker and darker a little bit each night, just remember that those things that are dark areas in your own life that you need to let go of. And I know we keep talking about this cycle, but it really is just a cycle of releasing and creating. That in order to shine in a month again, we want to let the darkness go. And that's what we're about during this time. And that darkness can be the collective darkness as well. I think we're dancing a thin line there, because some of this is going to be around, we're going to want more of a voice. And I think we should have more of a voice. We should put more of our voice out there. In other words, get on social media. On Twitter is a good place, or other places. There are other platforms. And say, hey, lady, you promised to release some files. Now, either you need to revoke your promise, but that hasn't happened, or release the files, and we need to become more proactive with those kinds of positions. I think holding people accountable to their commitments is a big thing right now, because that's the energy of Pisces to Aries. So you might as well follow the energy. Perfect. Call people out on that. Be a little more vocal, because that's the Aries path. We're stepping into that energy. Where before it was like, oh, don't rattle any boats. Now it's like, you saw it. People want aggression now. And the fight is on. Another thing I think we could do and should do is pray for peace, because these top two lines just really concern me. And that could be conflict in many more places. There are so many hot spots around the world right now. So we have this spiritual connection with our higher self. We were doing this on Sunday nights together. Maybe we'll get that going again later in the year. I can't do it right now, but maybe we'll get it going again, or at least on some kind of more frequent basis, to pray for peace. Don't stop doing that. We need it. And we're going to need it more as this energy is closer and closer to us over the next year. And then I think the third thing is to get on our creating game. This is a fabulous time. I can't share all the details right now, but things have radically shifted in my own life in a very positive way, in a key area. And I'm thinking about writing a book on it when it all settles down. But just realize that, go back to Catherine Ponder, 1958. Very few of us were on the planet at that time. There was a big recession. She was the spiritual leader, the pastor, if you will, of a Unity Church in Birmingham, Alabama. Now, this is the Deep South in 1958. Women had no voice, and yet she did. And she was asked to lead a prosperity group. And through that came prosperity amidst the recession. So don't look around you and get all caught up in what's going on. There are always ways to make it through. And one of the things I've just been harping about is we have to have more than one source of income. And I know that takes a lot of work to put those blocks in place. It's not something you can just create instantly, but it's something that needs to be done. And right now is a wake-up time. And if you are still employed and have not lost your job, be aware that technology is coming in ways that it's going to affect all of us. So be working on those other areas where you say, well, my gosh, if it's all going to technology anyway, where do we go? That's where you get with your intuition. Because what's right for me is not right for you, and I can't speak to everybody's situation. We all have different levels of interest, training, capabilities, etc. And all of that has to be taken into consideration. So, what a week, right? What a week we have in front of us as the sun enters Aries. Let the games begin. It is the spring or March equinox. It begins the astrological new year. This is the 0-degree Aries chart. You notice that puts 0 degrees Aries on the ascendant point of the equal house system. And here we go. It's Happy New Year on Thursday. And I wish you a very Happy New Year. And I hope you celebrate big time as all of this unfolds. Let's have a wonderful year astrologically. There's going to be a lot going on. And here's the thing. You and I chose to be here together. And somehow you found me and I found you. And we're just looking at the sky together and we're analyzing it with our life and what we can do and our family and raising our kids and doing all the things that we do as parents and as adults, adulting, and even those of us on the upper end of the timeline who are moving toward the sunset. We're finding our own way too, and we're doing it together. And I'm glad you're on the journey with me. Check out the Old Soul, New Soul Astrology podcast. We have a new YouTube channel, and it's its own entity. And Robert and I have videos up there. We just put one up of Mercury retrograde, and this coming week, or toward the weekend probably, we will have one on the solar eclipse from Robert's perspective. And it's very positive. He thinks it's a very positive eclipse. I see a little more challenge to it as I put into this, but that's a whole different conversation, and much more so driven by the movement into Aries, I think, but also those Saros cycles are very important, and that's why I wanted to take more of your time to explain them in this weekly video. So thanks for watching. I appreciate it. I'm sending all kinds of love. Happy weeks between the eclipses as we watch the nights get darker and we release things that don't serve so that we can create full on beginning the end of the month. Have a great week. Thanks for watching.